Welcome everyone to our 2021 Ed Talk series. We know you have many choices when choosing your professional development activities, and there are some amazing opportunities here at the University of Arizona Global Campus and beyond. We are so happy that you chose to be here today with us as the UAGC Department of Education and Liberal Arts proudly presents to you Ed Talks. I'm Dr. Jessie Upshaw, and I am honored to lead the Professional Development Committee of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here in the UAGC College of Arts and Sciences. I will be your host this afternoon. Today, we launched the 8th series of Ed Talks. For those of you who are new to Ed Talks, this is not your traditional professional development webinar. Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever popular way of sharing concepts through personal storytelling. Our 2021 Ed Talk series is entitled Multipliers, and it's inspired by the study of the work of Liz Wiseman and her New York Times bestselling book, Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. Here to explore and extend Wiseman's foundational concept of the multiplier effect with her story is a 2019 Multiplier of the Year finalist and UAGC's own Dr. Denise Maxwell. As you listen to Denise's story, you might listen for your call to action to share your practices that support a culture of leadership and the multiplier effect in your own classroom and the interactions that you have with students and colleagues. Or perhaps you might find a new practice that her story and our discussion sparks for you. Denise, will you come on camera to say hello as I introduce you?
Doing this.
Thanks, Denise. Dr. Denise Maxwell serves as the lead faculty for the MA in Education program in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts here at UAGC. She earned her Ed.D. in Educational Leadership from the University of Phoenix, as well as an MA in Educational Leadership from the University of Northern Colorado and an MA in Education and Educational Psychology from Ball State University. Her professional experiences ranged from classroom teacher, special education teacher, professional developer, mentor, administrator, principal, educational consultant, assistant professor, and associate dean. Her passion for online learning and instruction serves as the motivation for her joining UAGC. She is definitely a lifelong learner. Denise especially enjoys the online interaction as students share what they've gained from another peer or class interaction and how that process changes their insight and their own skills. She has a passion for teacher preparation and leadership development, which you'll hear today in her story. And she takes tremendous pride in the role that she has in the development of other leaders in the field throughout her career. A guiding principle that has directed her during her career is that the leader serves as a coach to empower others to be successful. Building the capacity for teachers and educational leaders is a mission for Denise in her role as a lead faculty member. Although Dr. Maxwell has lived all over the world due to being part of military families, she currently lives in Denver, Colorado. She has 2 adult daughters and a grandson who brings so much joy to her life. And outside her time here at UAGC, she can be found spending time with her family, cheering on her Broncos, on the ski slopes, or I've been told trying out her snowshoes with that fresh powder that Colorado saw this last week. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Maxwell.
Thank you for having me and for hosting.
Denise, I'm now going to ask that we remove our videos so we can get started after a few brief reminders. As a reminder, Ed Talks are fashioned after TED Talks, the ever popular way of sharing personal stories for only 18 minutes. We do this because we want to hear your stories, and we can best do that by sharing our stories. Our goal here is not necessarily to teach you anything new, as you are already an expert in your field. Our goal is to perhaps motivate you to try something new in your approach to helping your students succeed. Our storytelling approach is geared to not take a lot of your time, but rather to simply set the stage for an interactive conversation and perhaps encourage you to encourage your students in some new way. At the end of our Ed Talk today, we look forward to hearing your story of what you're doing or will do in your classroom or educational setting. So after Denise's story, we will open up the conversation and invite all participants to share your reflection and practices in the chat. So with that said, audience members, if you could please hold your comments and the chat to the end as we listen to Denise's story. Denise, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. As we start, please consider these questions as you listen to this Ed Talk presentation on the multiplier effect. Have you ever considered the influence and impact that others in your life have had on your intellectual capacity? Is it possible that there are people in our lives, past and present, who have served in the role of a multiplier of our intelligence and capabilities? Or is it that our level of intelligence is fixed and we can only learn new skills through our life experiences and educational opportunities? Is it possible that people in our lives may have served as intelligence diminishers, maybe accidentally or intentionally? As we spend this year considering the work by Liz Wiseman and the research her team published in the book Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter, we will examine the concept of how others, including ourselves as leaders and instructors, can be genius makers, how we can make everyone around us smarter, how giving space to our students and colleagues can help them expand their own ideas, capabilities, strengths, and intelligence. The concept of the multiplier effect embraces the idea that multipliers get more by using more, reaching out and embracing more of people's intelligence, more of our students' capabilities, and their enthusiasm. When I think about applying the multiplier effect to my life experiences, different memories come to mind about multipliers who in my formative years must have believed that intelligence is not a static measure, but rather is something that can be grown or increased. When I was in high school, I had questions in my mind about college, which revolve more around, do I have what it takes beyond tuition to even hope to attend college? One of the first multipliers I can remember is my 10th grade US history teacher. She asked me the question of where did I want to go to school and what did I want to study? At first, I couldn't even respond to the question because no one had ever articulated that vision for me. Whether Mrs. DeRobio knew she was being a multiplier at that moment, she certainly was. Through that question, she created space for me to consider that possibility while also communicating her belief in my ability to aspire to that goal, the multiplier effect in action. She asked the question, provided space, presented a challenge, but communicated her belief in my capabilities to grow to accept this challenge. Multipliers do not only uncover the intelligence in others, they also increase it. Deciding that college was a possibility, I still had lingering questions about what skills or talents do I possess that would translate into a career. As a junior high student, I had become involved in volunteering at the local Center for Children and Young Adults with Cerebral Palsy. This was during a time in this nation when children with any type of physical or mental disability were not allowed to be enrolled in the public schools. Therefore, organizations like Easter Seal, United Cerebral Palsy, Association for Mental Retardation, and other well-intending groups with names of this nature provided educational settings and social events for students and their families. As my volunteer time increased, I had the good fortune to interact with another significant multiplier, Nancy, who was the sponsor of the National Youth Committee, which I served on as a member. This was part of the National United Cerebral Palsy Organization in New York City. I had the opportunity through my final years in high school and during college to participate on the National Concerned Youth for United Cerebral Palsy Committee. Nancy, just in her mid-20s, the only adult sponsor for that youth committee, challenged me. She challenged me to consider opportunities to put myself in situations that made me feel uncomfortable. Such situations as speaking before national conferences working on national legislation that resulted in the wheelchair access symbol included in the Rehabilitation and Access Act of 1973, and working with youth in other regions of the country to develop youth groups to work with young adults with disabilities. Okay, I know the year of 1973 was well before many of you were even a mere toddler. The trust, the confidence, encouragement, and the challenges set forth by Nancy all demonstrated how she was not only a multiplier for me, but for other members on the committee. She supported our ideas and challenged us to think even more broadly. Not only did Nancy increase my intelligence, but my own belief in my capabilities and ownership of goals for my future. Through this relationship, I became confident I would succeed in earning a college degree and use this successfully in a profession. Have you ever just sat and observed people and then reflected about what you learned from what the person said or did? Did you have an opportunity to grow from that experience? According to Liz Wiseman, to be a multiplier, in other words, to grow people around us, we need to think and act in ways that ignites everyone's natural genius and intelligence. Some of the examples that come to mind from my life journey, and I want to emphasize these are just my own observations and opinions, but there are many comparisons of who might be a multiplier and who might be an accidental diminisher in our everyday lives. One example on my journey is thinking about individuals who serve as authors, TV celebrities, and are recognized for their knowledge related to personal growth. The two examples that come to mind for me are Brene Brown and Oprah Winfrey. As Oprah Winfrey has developed and evolved in her role, she demonstrates the ability to probe and ask questions, to engage the speaker in greater reflection, therefore giving the person an opportunity to examine their own values and strengths. Through this interaction, individuals have an opportunity to develop a greater belief in their own capabilities and consider how they might contribute these talents to improve their work or contributions to their community. Brene Brown, not to imply that she does not ask thought-provoking and reflective questions, however, in some of her interactions, she tends to share her own examples or turn the discussion to her life experiences. One of the cognitive coaching principles teaches us when engaged in a conversation with others, the facilitator of the conversation needs to honor the concept of autobiographical listening set-asides and keep the discussion and conversation solely focused on the person who is either being coached or mentored. This provides space and the opportunity for the person to grow in their thinking. This is an example of serving as a multiplier. A sports example of serving as a multiplier comes to mind from what I observed with Joe Flacco and Peyton Manning, both playing the quarterback position late in their careers on the professional football team of the Denver Broncos. Peyton Manning saw this as an opportunity to develop others through his mentoring and support, encouragement, and identification of talent. So much so that receivers around him advanced from the practice squad to the team roster. Joe Flacco was publicly interviewed and responded saying it was not his responsibility to develop young quarterbacks or other players on the team. It was his job to develop his position as the quarterback. From these two responses, you can see the difference of observing when a multiplier is in action and what the multiplier effect looks like in comparison to an accidental diminisher. Another example from the world of entertainment is from a show I enjoy, The Voice, which involves musical coaches and their role of taking aspiring artists and developing them, not just to win the show, but to develop their skills and help them break into the industry or give them the support they need to evolve to that level of performance. Thinking about various coaches, Adam Levine was all about winning the show at all costs, and it was much more of a competition. Examples of multipliers who serve as coaches on that show could include Blake Shelton, Usher, and John Legend. For them, It's all about developing the talent, skills, and confidence that each musician needs to have to help them evolve and achieve their goals. An example from my own experience as a lifelong educator working for different directors and superintendents, both happen to be female leaders. One of the leaders, Susan, was an intentional diminisher, an intelligence diminisher, and working under her leadership felt like my intelligence was diminished because I was not confident in myself, questioned my decision-making, and my judgment. What was missing in that relationship was the trust. Not only the trust that we had with each other, but even the trust that Susan had in herself. This leader's focus on competition and individual aspirations served as a detriment to my development and a glaring non-example of the multiplier effect. The other leader, Mary, demonstrated the multiplier effect as she challenged me, gave me opportunities, communicated her belief in me, but also asked, how can I learn from a mistake or error in judgment and use these events as a learning opportunity for my individual growth? That exemplified in my life another example of what a multiplier is in action and the elements of the multiplier effect that you can observe in your own personal and professional life. Working for a multiplier like Mary may be the hardest you've ever worked in your life. They give you more understanding and more space, but they also expect more. So a challenge I have for you as an instructor, and this connects to the discussion questions posed at the beginning of the presentation. When you're reflecting on what the multiplier effect looks like for you as an instructor, spend time reflecting on your experiences and interactions with people in your circle to identify elements of the multiplier effect in your own life, or observe your actions in the classroom as a multiplier. We bring out the best in others. We'll also bring out the best in ourselves, and will dramatically improve or multiply the results we get together. In my years as a school principal, I had many opportunities to learn from my mistakes. As multipliers evolve through their own life journey, they generally start to sense an increased willingness to take risks and learn from their mistakes. A few things that I have tried in my leadership roles resulted in some of my favorite responses, which hopefully created the space while also encouraging the educator, parent, student, or colleague to believe in themselves and expand their own capabilities while growing their intelligence and resilience. One of my favorite statements when someone was struggling with the decision after discussing options was to say, I believe you have the ability within you to decide what to do. You have given it a great deal of thought, and I believe in you. Of course, this is most successful when followed up with, I'll check back with you in a few days to see how it's going. One of my accidental diminisher tendencies, this includes my behavior to focus on being positive and not acknowledging the challenge or demands of a task or requirement. However, there are tendencies in each of us to accidentally diminish the talents of others, but that's a topic to be shared in another Ed Talk on another day. My tendency to overemphasize the positive attributes is a challenge reflected in the statement, which I have shared several times. My comment, which may not acknowledge how challenging the situation is, hidden within each challenge is an opportunity for our own growth. One of the concepts that I believe in deeply was developed through the grace of some of these multipliers in my life, Mrs. DeRobio, Nancy, and Mary. They modeled for me, when we make mistakes, this serves as a learning opportunity. The question that provides the space for an individual to think about this is, what would you do differently next time? Or what did you learn from this? This is something that every parent can smile about and recognize in their own parenting. There are probably some downsides to the multiplier effect. You can earn a reputation of being a demanding boss, supervisor, instructor, or even parent. As Liz Wiseman likes to describe this, working for a multiplier is not all kisses and cupcakes. It can be intense and challenging. Although I do feel these individuals feel valued and engaged, some of these individuals under a multiplier supervision or within their circle of influence thrive with the expanded knowledge that they have made tremendous growth, but they also know that those around them are working equally hard. One of the benefits of the multiplier effect is people working in this type of environment or learning in this type of classroom will volunteer more of their time and energy and intellectual capabilities because they enjoy the challenge of the work and enjoy watching themselves grow in ways maybe they never anticipated. It's not the competition, but the success of doing the work better and having an impact on more students, the entire school, or the organization that is so rewarding. Knowing that others will propose ideas on how to enhance practice or change the routine so things are new and exciting, that is the reward of working or learning in an environment that is shaped by the multiplier effect. Students also see this high level of expectation and encouragement as a motivator to thrive, to learn more, and to see more opportunities for application of the knowledge and skills developed in themselves. So how does the multiplier effect and being a multiplier apply to me as an online instructor with adult learners? When you peel back the elements within an effective multiplier, there are connections that can be made to critical thinking, the growth mindset concepts promoted by Carol Dweck, and the concept that each of us, including our students, can evolve into becoming multipliers within our personal and professional lives. The growth mindset concepts focuses on continually developing, that students and the colleagues will develop, explore, challenge, consult, and support the growth of others. Multipliers are deeply curious about the knowledge and capabilities of their students and others who they lead. By asking questions, you can focus the student on examining some of the right problems. Students and instructors can also challenge everyone to think more deeply and come up with better solutions. I'm thinking about the application of this to the classroom. In our instruction, the element of critical thinking is challenging for each one of us. As an instructor, asking just the right question in the right way to engage the student in thinking more deeply about the concept is crucial. Providing feedback which engages the student in goal setting, self-reflection, or just the right amount of encouragement to embrace the feedback and move forward to reach their goals help us serve as multipliers for our students. Another connection from the multiplier effect is in the wording within the mission statement for the College of Arts and Science, to inspire and empower students to advance as professionals, individuals, and community leaders. This mission is more than words, but a vision that guides our actions and decisions while embracing the elements of the multiplier effect. Do our questions and feedback to students inspire them and empower them to grow their intelligence, capabilities, and skills? It's a choice for each of us. Will we simply be the genius or the smartest person in the room? Or will we be the multiplier who can serve in both roles, sometimes being the genius and sometimes being the genius maker? Thanks to Liz Wiseman and her research group for the inspiration in this book and some of the concepts that were shared in today's Ed Talk. Jessie, back to you for the discussion.
Denise, thank you so much for sharing your story and really setting the stage for us as we all reflect on what role we might play in creating and maintaining that culture of building leaders and that multiplying mindset. I know, having experienced Denise's multiplying tendencies personally as a colleague, I can say that it really has sparked a lot of thoughts, both for personal, professional, and within my classroom. Denise has posed some questions here for us to consider as we reflect on our own practices, so we can look through this lens of multipliers. I'd like to open up the chat lines now for you to consider your takeaways from today's story. So let's frame our discussion for what you might currently be doing in your practice to support student success. What are you inspired to do next? Or can you think of a time that you were a multiplier or were multiplied by others? Let's go ahead and start sharing your impressions, your ideas, or perhaps your new approach in the chat. And we do invite you to join the conversation to inspire others with your story. I do know that for me, this really makes me have a shift in paradigm for my classroom with my students. It allows that opportunity to see them as the future leaders and the ways that I can truly build them up as the next leaders in their field beyond just in our classroom. Jen, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You know, late last year, I started adding to the end of my feedback for my students. What feedback is important to you? What feedback is something you can use later? What feedback is important now? Just 4 or 5 questions for them to really think about how to process the feedback. And I've dropped off doing that. And now listening to Denise, I'm really wanting to put that back in, because then when I give feedback, I'm providing a few prompts to help my students consider how to look at that feedback and hopefully use it next time.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jen. I see Nina is mentioning in the chat here, asking questions in the discussion and making them think about how we are studying or how what we're studying really connects to what they're experiencing at work. That real life connection really provides that opportunity for them to grow and become that multiplier, that leader, and allows them the opportunity to share what they want to become versus what we are telling them in the classroom. I love that, Nina. Do you have a Susan in your life, or a Mary, or Mrs. DeRovio? I know that I do. Denise is actually one of my inspirations for moving on what I do. Not to make her blush too much here in this session, but I have had some experiences with both the multiplier and those that have diminished my potential. And I've learned from both, just as in Denise's story. Can you think of a time in your classroom that you had the opportunity to be that multiplier for your students? Kelly, I see your hand.
Thanks, Jessie. You know, I was thinking about the PhD students that I work with and how they are oftentimes in a space of feeling insecure because this journey is so new to them and they've never done anything like it before. And so I like the idea of being transparent about that you are seeking out their genius, that you are highlighting intentionally the areas with their writing or their thinking or their researching that they're really good at. And yes, there are tweaks that need to be made because it's a dissertation journey. It's intense. But I think by sort of labeling it, like I am highlighting what you are good at, I'm looking for your moments of genius. I think that opens up their mindset around the growth mindset piece. And then it just ripples out because then they start doing the same thing in their life. I mean, ideally, right? So thank you.
It's that exponential growth. And I think, that's what we're always going for as educators. I think, how can we impact the next set of people who are going to then impact the next set of people? And I think that really speaks to the multiplier concept that Wiseman has presented here for us. Thank you so much, Kelly. Debbie, do you want to come on?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I too have had the honor of being able to work as Denise's colleague. And I can say that so often we don't really realize what we're capable of ourselves until it is pointed out to us by someone who says, I believe you have what it takes to take on this challenge. And when someone else that you are close to has that confidence in you and that belief in you, that makes a tremendous effect. And I think it's something that we can take away when we work with our own students. But there's a caveat to that. It's not just the positive encouragement and the belief, it's also the accountability piece. And remember that Denise said she would often couple that comment, I believe that you are capable of this, with, I'll check back in with you and see how you're doing. And I think that as instructors, we need to remember that, pairing that belief in our students and providing them with that challenge, with that deep critical thinking question, and then saying, I'm going to come back in to see what you think of that, because I'm real curious to know your thoughts. So thank you, Denise, for reminding us of that.
I wrote that down too, Debbie, that piece, that it's without the follow-up, or without the, I'll check back in with you to see what else you need. It's providing that opportunity to grow, but not without the support and the continued forward movement. I thank you so much for sharing that. Kathleen, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
There, I think I'm on. I just wanted to echo what Debbie said. In the courses that I teach, I always try to think of how I was as a student. My first attempt might not have been my best attempt, but those instructors that allowed me to redo and become a better version of myself through my writing really helped me grow and helped me become a better student. So when I think of my students, I always like to give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they had a bad day and yet they still had to submit because it was Sunday night. Well, your first submission may not be your best, and I want you to redo it. So just having that perseverance for students and telling them they can do better and show me, and let's work together, I think is really important to make sure our students multiply and become greater at what they do in their professional life.
That's so true. And I love that perspective too, of thinking about my time as an undergraduate, my time as a graduate student, my time in the classroom, when they're balancing their family lives. It allows that connection, and still the support with the you'll get through it. It might take a couple of tries, but I'm here to support you. What can you do next? Thank you so much, Kathleen. I noticed in the chat here, Tamika mentions that emphasis on recommendations and commendations, so that you have that balance between allowing the support and expertise of the person you're working with, as well as the opportunity to learn and grow from one another. Thank you so much for sharing that, Tamika. Kim mentions that multipliers believe in us, support us, have high expectations, and hold us accountable. Very well said. This is what we as instructors can do for our students. When we do this, we watch them grow and thrive.
As I was listening to what Kelly was sharing about how to help them see their strengths and have that growth mindset, I was coaching a student a couple weeks ago, and he even said the language, and I had to comment on it, I can't do it yet. And I was like, that's exactly right. And I think that if we believe and embrace the growth mindset and the multiplier effect in our own lives, then it will just naturally come through in what we're saying to students or what the feedback is. It'll just become part of your personality in your toolbox, and you'll just reach in and use that, because you'll start to see how that is affirming their abilities, helping them develop, and also probably get some pretty complimentary responses from students when you help them evolve like that in a course.
So true, Denise. And I love how you mentioned that you get more by using more of what is there. And it's that constant, it may not always be easy. It might actually be the challenging thing, but it's the thing that will get them to where they want to go. And it'll be very memorable. Jen, I'd love to hear you.
Only if I can turn my video on, because then you have to hear me then, right? So Denise, I have a question. For those of us who are still trying to figure out if we're multipliers or diminishers, do you have any top hints or tricks so that we can start to figure out what we are?
Well, probably I would recommend reading Liz Wiseman's book. I mean, we're not trying to promote her book, but I do think that participating in this series, you will hear more of those elements. And I think that you will do the aha, oh, I see that in myself. So I can't recall exactly how many diminishers are listed, but we see them in all of our selves. It's not that there's necessarily something wrong with it. It's just recognizing it and being aware of it, and then deciding, should I intentionally not do this? And I know that I did that with Jessie as we were preparing, because of my tendency to be overly positive, and said to her, okay, I'm going to be an intentional diminisher, and I know I'm doing it, but I'm just going to stay in the realm of being positive. So I think that this journey that we're on will allow you to explore that. And I would imagine in each of the discussions and presentations, you're going to say, I have that quality. And it's mostly being aware of it to address it. It's not like you've got to remove it from who you are. It's just being more aware of it.
Thank you so much, Denise. And as Denise mentioned here, we are going to dig into some of the different multiplying tendencies and diminishing tendencies throughout our 2021 series this year. We will have sessions for you coming up on the third Thursday of the month from now until November. So please keep that in mind. We would love to dig even further into this topic with you. I noticed in the chat that Sherry is mentioning that really big highlight on the growth mindset and how it has an effect in entry level classes. She's hearing it come through with students referring to it. And then I love your math metaphor here. She also says it is a perfect way to connect multipliers to growth, and keeping in mind with the math metaphor that the diminishers can be dividers or subtractors. So that kind of gives us a nice way to think about it. And Stephanie's mentioning in the chat, it seems we need to listen to what students want to discover and then help them to refine their questions to empower their learning. And Stephanie, I really think that also brings in that component of fostering their growth and kind of holding back to be there as the support while we continue to challenge and support. I love that. Jackie?
Yeah, just following up on what Stephanie Fink was saying, that's an excellent point, Steph, because in the education courses that I teach, a lot of them are wanting to be teachers, or they're teachers wanting to be administrators, or they're from the early childhood community wanting to start their own practice of some sort. So once we're in a position to see where they are, something as simple in the discussions is, well, have you considered whatever that next step is? What, administration, owning your own educational services or something like that. That goes a long way. Something as simple as, have you considered? And I know that gets maybe away from whatever the block of the discussion is, but there's always a place for that when we're having the students stop and reflect on the possibility of what they could be. So thanks, Steph, for reminding us of that.
Exactly, Jackie, that potential. Karen mentions here in the chat that she believes multipliers ensure that others are able to access information. They share available resources, recognize and enrich the strengths of others, while encouraging growth of weaknesses and high expectations. I love that you mentioned that high expectations too, Karen, because I think that tendency of supporting others, we want to make sure that we're not losing that piece. It was mentioned the accountability and the high expectations. It doesn't mean that we're not still expecting them to continue to grow beyond what they may even have known their potential was. I love that Denise mentioned that question at the beginning, and I always wonder how often our students might be asking themselves, am I ready for this? Do I have what it takes to be in this classroom? Do I have what it takes to do what I'm doing? And we're here in their classroom to support and help them understand that, yes, there are high expectations, but you can do it, and here's how we will together unlock that potential. Well, it looks like our time is winding down, believe it or not. All good things must come to an end, but we will be continuing this discussion in greater detail over the coming months. Again, the third Thursday of the month until November. Please do look for a follow-up email in the next few days where you'll find a link to our Ed Talks page, as well as access to certificates of participation. And we will also house our Ed Talks recordings there. If you are here with us live on a computer, keep your eye on the chat. You should see a file come through for you to download your certificate of participation for today's session. If you're joining us via a mobile device, or if you're watching the recording, you will have that opportunity to download that certificate from the Ed Talks homepage. We again want to acknowledge the hard work of Liz Wiseman and her Multipliers book for the inspiration for today's Ed Talk, as well as the rest of the series. And speaking of our next session, please do come back and see us on April 15th, same time, same place, as Dr. Tony Farrell shares a story of being a talent magnet. We thank you so much for joining us today. A huge thank you again to Dr. Denise Maxwell for sharing with us her story to inspire our next steps in supporting our students and each other. And on behalf of Department Chair Dr. Tony Farrell and UAGC's College of Arts and Sciences Department of Education and Liberal Arts, we wish you a safe, healthy, and impactful March, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much.